and on today's IT Roundtable, we're talking about creating a more agile process to accelerate digital transformation. To discuss that, I'm joined by three people who know a lot about the topic and also have plenty of first-hand experience. With me today is Patty Court, Director of End User Computing at MXGBT. Patty, good to have you with us today.
Thank you, James. Good to be here.
Also with me is Paul Dior, co-founder of ReadyWorks. Hello to you, Paul.
How you doing, James?
Good, good. Rounding out our panel today is Kyle Haraldson, Chief Executive Officer of Swimmage. Kyle, good to have you on board today.
Thank you, James.
All right, so let's talk about digital transformation, but first let's get some background. Patty, can you tell us about MXGBT? Give us sort of the brief overview.
So we are a global corporate travel company. We do corporate travel for many large companies. And as I stated, we're global. We have approximately, say, 20,000 endpoints. And this is not so much anymore. Going back to 2020, really looking at that was the peak of, our highest employee base, which was around 20,000, and, approximately the same amount of endpoints at that time.
So it's from the sound of it, there's certainly some complexities involved. I mean, what problem were you trying to solve?
So we had, at the time, we had a mostly, I'll say about 80% virtual population. We had 20 to 30% maybe in the offices, but we were actually in the infancy stages. So we had started deploying Windows 10, and then we were continuing to deploy, but we were in the infancy stages of looking at autopilot. And we realized that this just wasn't going to be ready in time that we needed it. So we started to look. We knew we needed to pivot to something. So we started to look and to see what was available in the environment that we could move to.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kyle, how does Swimmage address these kind of problems? What would you do?
Well, Swimmage has been around for many years. It's a mature, very flexible OS migration deployment, a full lifecycle PC solution. And it is a perfect fit for the GBT requirements because it has all the necessary aspects in it to deal with security, such that GBT has, remote workers, so on and so forth. And it really addresses the things to make sure the PC gets migrated properly, including data, settings, applications, everything as far as which rules are designed to incorporate and to do that migration. So the user experience is really seamless. And it also is, part of the GBT requirement is to have it secure and encrypted, which is what they have on all their systems. So we can migrate encrypted PCs and we can work with the security, pretty tight security. In fact, we'll work with it, not around it. So we keep everything secure, which is an important part of it. And because we've been around for so long, we've dealt with a lot of the furthest reaches systems, and we wanted a system that can address every PC, not just the 80-20 rule. So you've got PCs that are in the farthest reaches, really hard to get to. We have a solution that can meet that need, which is perfect for this particular problem we were faced with. And we also have something that's very resilient to allow even the end user to migrate themselves because of the level of automation, level of resiliency. It's very difficult to break, and it's a seamless process end to end.
Well, Paul, how does ReadyWorks address these kind of problems?
Cool. So digital transformation, right? It's a term that's being used by a lot of different folks, depending on their need. But from our perspective, and as it pertains to the infrastructure, it essentially means taking an organization from one legacy footprint and ultimately bringing them through a migration, a transformation, or an evolution into some target end state. And when we're trying to accelerate that process for an enterprise like GBT, that's a pretty well stated goal and challenge that a lot of big enterprises are trying to tackle. And despite many of the tools that are currently in place, it's still pretty difficult to answer some basic questions around what devices are in the environment, who uses them, who owns them, what applications do they run, and how do they support the business. The answer to these types of questions, though, largely informs how these transformations are ultimately delivered. And this goes for your endpoints or even in the data center. But specifically in the context of MXGBT and transforming that desktop environment, just consider having to coordinate, change for tens of thousands of users globally. Thinking about the life cycle of the assets that they use every day, and you're literally tracking millions of moving parts, scheduling resources, orchestrating supply chains, communicating with stakeholders, vendors, internal IT teams. There's a lot of inherent complexity in doing so. And so, the traditional approaches to delivering these types of programs are often really costly and potentially risky. And according to most analysts, they say like 45% of IT projects don't meet their objectives or tend to go over budget. So the need for kind of a work management platform such as ReadyWorks just allows teams to bring together data, analytics, automations, and some really refined best practices and tooling to accelerate these digital transformation objectives.
Mm-hmm. So Patty, you realized you had some issues. What were the major challenges that you encountered?
I think the question should actually be, what challenges didn't we encounter, right? I mean,
Oh,
if it was, if it could happen, it did happen. Let's see, shortly after we kicked off with both Swimmage and ReadyWorks, there was a global pandemic. I'm not sure that, how many times we're going to be able to say that in our history, that's one of our issues, but it was. Offices actually closed. So where we did have folks in offices where we thought we could really, that was going to be our biggest bang for our buck, to be able to just leverage Swimmage, pass around a USB stick and get them upgraded quickly. Well, they now went home, right? So offices closed, everybody now is 100% virtual. And if you think about that, you also look at shutdowns, right? So in EMEA, Asia Pac, I mean, we were faced with literally, people couldn't go anywhere. So we had shipping challenges. So think about getting that USB stick, as easy as it seems, to those end users became so very complicated because deliveries in some cases, they stopped. One of the other big things was we decided right in the middle of everything to migrate to a new VPN client and a new VPN, a new network platform. So, like I said, if it could happen, it did happen. And it just, but, the team that we had working together with us with Swimmage and with ReadyWorks, everybody just adapted and, was there for us throughout the entire process.
I mean, I think you can safely say those are indeed major challenges from the way you described. I wouldn't question you on that.
Yeah.
Paul, what would you say? How does ReadyWorks address problems like this?
Sure. So at the heart of any of these programs, right, everything begins with the data. And again, going back to answering those fundamental questions or the simple questions of, again, what's out there, who's using it, and so forth. But in the context of all the change that Patty just alluded to, a lot of that data was kind of very much in flight or fluid and oftentimes, difficult to nail down. So what we did from a platform perspective is we were able to aggregate information from multiple systems of record, in particular Config Manager SCCM for user, for device information, Active Directory with respect to the users of those devices, ServiceNow information, and so on and so forth. So we were able to pull together a lot of data from different places that allowed the teams to get a complete and comprehensive view around what was out there. And with kind of breaking down the silos, let's say that reside between those different platforms, we were able to kind of see what was necessary to run the program. Again, traditionally, this would have been done with PMs and teams pulling together different inventory from different tools and then working spreadsheets upon spreadsheets and trying to correlate information while all of these things are changing in the background. It really just essentially would have been a non-starter. But because we're able to plug into that environment and consume those changes on a near real-time basis, we always had an accurate pulse of what was kind of current in the environment and what the target was, and ultimately how we needed to kind of encounter those changes and pivot or adjust accordingly. So while there were many, and we really encountered several, none of them were such that it completely derailed the program. We were really able to kind of apply, consistent approaches and framework despite all of those changes. And again, that was kind of built off of that kind of sound data foundation.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Kyle, what is your approach? I mean, how does Swimmage address these kind of problems?
Well, the nice thing about Swimmage is it's a highly flexible, highly modular system. And we've really focused on being able to accommodate almost every type of scenario out there. So we're able to take conditions that change, like the COVID, for example, and pivot on a dime to accommodate that change. So all we have to do really is reevaluate which methods we were going to use, and then shift gears a little bit and say, we're going to switch ours to a all remote, all virtual migration process using exclusively the sticks. And that's going to be the method we're going to be using. And then as things change throughout the process, we also have an update process that ensures that the sticks that go out are always up to date, regardless of how long ago they were built. So as the VPN changed midstream, we had also applications changing, a lot of configuration sets changing throughout. We're able to get the updated process going pretty rapidly for these guys.
All right, well, Patty, let's take a look at your decision-making process. What brought you to ReadyWorks and Swimmage?
Well, I will say it was literally a Google search. My boss
really?
is
Okay.
big on Google search. So, when you're really looking for something, you can find it in a Google search. But, at any rate, we obviously then met with, these were the two after, looking at what was available. We really landed on, we had a meeting with ReadyWorks and we had a meeting with Kyle and Swimmage. And they had everything that we were looking for. So we needed to find something that would, our travel counselors, they're like call center agents, right? So we needed something that was going to allow us to have their workforce management team schedule them to break down, to be able to have a pattern in which they were broken down into waves, regional waves, time waves. I mean, there was just, on and on all the different, possible scenarios you can think of, but then having these workforce management people be able to go in and schedule them and then coordinate also shipping out the USB so it's there, and then having our service desk folks available and ready to know when they need to schedule people. So really just after that search and those meetings, we knew that these were the two companies that we wanted to work with.
Great. So Kyle, how does Swimmage engage with MXGBT other than just the Google search?
So our onboarding process is actually very, very simple. So we initially did a live demo and, proved out the technology from that. And we moved forward pretty quickly, since we really did meet all the requirements of MXGBT pretty much out of box. We were able to come in and very quickly get this ramped up. And it has been, wonderful to work with the GPT team, honestly.
Paul, what's your experience in terms of how does ReadyWorks engage with MXGBT?
Sure. Actually, I remember the download that Patty did from our site, which was a Windows 10 migration plan. And what that really did was it spawned the conversation around, hey, you're kind of embarking on this program. Here's some kind of framework or best practices around how to do that. And by way of that download, and it sparked a conversation, and it ultimately began a process of partnering, right? Understanding what GBD was looking to accomplish, really understanding kind of their target, their objectives, and so forth, and kind of walking a mile in their shoes to understand what the process looked like from end to end. And then trying to identify which of those elements in that process we could bring value to. What were the labor intensive, manual, or repetitive things that we could leverage a platform to do and kind of drive that value. So for instance, in the context of how this process would roll out new devices to again, tens of thousands of users, there was often a communications program that would notify end users and stakeholders of what to expect, and notify logistics vendors, so on and so forth. And so before, during, and after any event, you would have 3, 4, 5, or multiple emails, per device. So if you multiply that, you're talking, 20, 30,000 emails and communications to kind of orchestrate people to identify or notify, and that type of effort was completely automated and aligned with those waves and those plans that we laid out, and eliminated the overhead from a labor perspective, and allowed the PMs and the leadership to kind of focus on the things that were potential bottlenecks or issues that needed to be escalated, whereas these kind of administrative and overhead elements we could automate. So in that process, understanding what the program was, and then highlighting where the elements of value could be, and then ultimately configuring the platform to kind of drive the needle.
Interesting. So Patty, what exactly was your goal? I mean, what specifically were you hoping to achieve?
I think, like a lot of people were in the same boat we were in. Windows 7 was going out of support. We needed to make sure we got all of our systems upgraded to Windows 10 so we could patch them. So that was our immediate need, right? How can we get our systems upgraded? How can we do it, and provide a good end user experience and have the, minimal impact to the business? Because while we were, in this flux and in this, horrible thing of COVID, we still needed to, business travel virtually stopped. Nobody was traveling, which actually became, a good thing for us at this time. But, we still needed, for the folks that we had working, we really need to make sure that they were available when they needed to be available, and, just really, with minimal impact to them, be able to do, these upgrades.
Mhm. So in other words, the stoppage helped you to do some of the work. Is that what you're saying?
It actually did. I mean, the timing
Mhm.
with all the things that we had to do, the timing was good. I'll say that's the positive thing of COVID.
Sure.
And like I said, we also did a major VPN migration in the middle of that, which, also having, more availability to our folks that were working because they weren't out there booking travel made that a little bit easier as well.
Right. So Kyle, how did Swimish accomplish these goals for MXGBT?
And one of the main focuses that we have is to provide business continuity throughout. And because this kind of migration is very interruptive to businesses, so we really focus on a couple of main factors. Number one is to provide a really good user experience so that the users are down very little, so that they can continue doing their job. So you don't have that sort of interruption in the process, in their business and what they need to do. So very little downtime is a big one. And we wanted to have them also migrate on their time scale. So we schedule it out so the users can do a migration. It takes, not very long at all to do. It's completely automated, hands-free. They can do it, over lunchtime, after hours at dinner. So they don't really have that downtime that you'd normally have. We also want to make sure that we put all the functionality around it so they don't have any risk of data loss, because we want to restore and preserve all their information on their PC. So when you do that migration, it's not coming back and the user has to spend the next week trying to reconfigure their device or find data and things like that. Really, our goal is to have all functionality restored, including data, settings, applications, and everything for the user in just a very short order of time for the users, completely automated. So that's the primary goal, to minimize that business interruption.
Mm-hmm. So Paul, sounds like there were some definite challenges involved. How did ReadyWorks accomplish that goal for MXGBT?
Sure. So as Patty mentioned, and as we talked about before, there was a lot of fluid elements, COVID in the mix, new vendors, infrastructure changes. All of these things were kind of introduced in the mid-flight of this program, but we needed to move forward despite all of that. With Windows 7 end of life, it was kind of a forced march. If we hadn't reached or kind of gotten to the finish line by that end of life period, those systems would have been end of life and potentially compromised or vulnerable systems. And so we needed to do that from a risk mitigation perspective. And so again, being able to be agile and dynamic with all of those changes in the mix, being able to integrate the tools between Swimage and other infrastructure elements, and the cast involved with the program, allowed us to still accomplish the program within time, within budget, and within the parameters that were originally set out. Under traditional circumstances, this is a challenge. Throw in all these other elements, we were still very, very successful in bringing the program through to completion, driving the migration successfully over the finish line, and doing so within that end of life target end date. So we were pretty pleased and happy with the outcome despite all of those elements in the mix.
All right, so Patty, as you were making your decision, what did you find most attractive about the solutions? Was it feature set? Was it company background? What really influenced you?
Yeah, I think it was both of those, to be honest. But we have a very, as you've heard Kyle and Paul both talk about, we have a very non-technical workforce, right? Their job is to book travel. That's what they know how to do, and that's probably 80% of our folks. Which is a huge percentage. So when we were looking at this, we really needed to find something that was going to fit that niche, right? To be able to support those non-technical folks. The other side of it was both of them seemed, both tools easy to implement. I'm not without a lot of work, but I mean, when you're looking at, something like, virtually migrating users to Windows 10. That's never easy, but they both seem easy to implement in a very short amount of time, which is what we needed. And both companies were very customer focused. We really just liked the interaction. We felt that we would get the attention that we needed to be able to complete this, which was awesome. And they're still there, right? So we're still going, we still have the relationship, and we'll continue the relationship because it just was so successful.
Yeah, sometimes partnership makes all the difference with vendors sometimes.
Yeah.
I've definitely heard that.
Absolutely.
So Paul and Kyle, how did you approach this project? Paul, why don't you go first? How did you approach it?
I think Patty just nailed it on the head, right? We really teamed together collectively between ourselves, the different, stakeholders, and really understood what the program needed to be, to accomplish, and really trying to do so in a way that was nimble and fast. If we needed months and months of setup time and configuration and so forth to deploy our respective systems and to bring this program to start, we never would have gotten that a first year. So really a collective understanding of what needed to happen, and how we all played a part, really just drove the program forward. Without that, it would have been the left hand not talking to the right hand, and again, there would have been just inherent challenges throughout. But doing so really just brought everyone on the same cadence, and by leveraging the ReadyWorks platform, everyone really has a single understanding and a perspective of the program. Traditionally, those types of perspectives come from a silo or data that they own, or one piece of the puzzle that's within their scope. But by doing so within ReadyWorks, it really gave everyone complete transparency around what was going on. It allowed us to identify what were risks, what were critical path items, what were things we needed to understand, and either move up or down or adjust accordingly.
Kyle, what would you add? What was Swimmage's approach to this project?
I mean, we have a bit of a phased approach. The approach we come in is we really want to make no assumptions and gather the requirements, gather all the information, find out where the risks are, where there might be any roadblocks, and uncover those rattlesnakes that may be under rocks to really find where things are at, so we can figure out a way to navigate that landscape. And it can be challenging at times. So we really want to stand back and identify what is going on. And the GBT project team really helped us with that. And so some of the things we did in this project is we collected all their application requirements, collecting the application portfolio from SECM, and any of the matching rules we defined. If you have one application, you need to replace it. What is the rule to do that? So we built all that out, built out the role provisioning so that we separated the back office functions and the travel consultants. We can separate those based on roles, identifying all the hardware and driver requirements is a big part of that. And then identifying what is data, what does get migrated from PCs, so you don't have a garbage in, garbage out. You really want a pristine, good system, but not lose anything on the same vein. And then understand their security requirements. What are the security roadblocks? What do we have to navigate with to make sure everything is successful, especially when we're dealing with an in-place migration with encryption. We don't want to lose that encryption. We don't want to leave any PC exposed. And then identifying what other group policies may come down and interrupt with the process. So that's a big part of what we're determining in this, and then figuring out for the remote workers, which we had all of them as we started with this,
right,
is how we deal with the VPN connection. You've got to have some point, there has to be connection back to the headquarters to join the domain. So we had to deal with that situation as well. So we actually navigated a lot of that in the discovery phase. And then we went into the implementation phase, which actually went really fast. Once you have good information, it only took a week for us to get basic installation done. So we were up and ready, had everything working as a proof of concept with all the base stuff for both in-place and PC replacements in that first week. And then, part of that is to implement and work with the ReadyWorks to design the project workflow. That's an important key part of this entire project. And then we managed all the requirements, building out all the systems, which include image, applications, customizations, drivers, all the deployment rules. We provisioned all the systems, created all the proper roles and settings. We built all the offline media. We did the shipping for the sticks to the depot centers. Then we provided in the back end all the updates for managing all the offline media to make sure that when they deployed, they were all up to date. We also then trained the support staff. and provided the third level tier support for everything. And finally, we created a process for the PC replacements for the value-added reseller to do a PC to PC migration.
Paul, as a solution provider, what was required to implement this solution?
So I think Kyle just, again, touched on a number of those data points, if you will, and all of those pieces kind of inform the decision and inform the plan. So our objective to kind of support the mission was really to be able to move quickly, implement the platform very quickly, aggregate this information, collect this data in such a way that we can inform how that program rolls out. Whether an endpoint was an in-place candidate versus a full wipe and reload, or any of those other elements Kyle just talked about, really, again, instructed how we built the waves, how we scheduled the events, and ultimately the sequence of events that happen downstream from there. So understanding kind of where that data was coming from, defining what those data sources were, connecting to them, and ultimately bringing them together was really kind of critical in terms of the implementation. And then as we move forward, that process again kind of moves very, very quickly once you've been able to aggregate, normalize, and clean up the information, so you can execute on that program most quickly.
Kyle, what would you add in terms of requirements for this project? What did you need to do?
The requirements, infrastructure-wise, it's really not a heavy lift, although it does quite a bit. A single server with a SQL database, we got that up and running really quickly. Swimmage does the installation and installs all the prerequisites all on its own. And we also can integrate directly into SCCM. And then we have the managed system processing, helping with the migration schedule, appointments, and shippings, and ReadyWorks handled that solution very well. And then we dealt with project managers, both on the Swimmage side and on the MXGBT side, to make sure we had combined resources to make sure the project itself goes very smoothly, which I believe it really did. And then we provided a tech for implementation and for that third level support, and GBT supplied the support desk and second tier support. And then the other advantage of Swimmage is that really the support requirements around that first and second tier support are relatively thin because of the level of automation resiliency we provide.
Well, of course, it all comes down to bottom line. I mean, Patty, what were the specific outcomes as a result of this project?
Well, obviously, we were able to do what we needed to do, right? So we were able to schedule our users, first come up with a plan and how we were going to work, globally with all of our users, how we were going to break them into waves, the deployment of I'll say the USB Swimmage sticks to everybody now that everybody was virtual, leveraging ReadyWorks to send the email communications, doing the scheduling. We actually, in the interim, I forgot to mention, moved to Zoom, which actually was very helpful. Okay. During this whole thing, because we were actually, like Kyle stated, we had service desk representatives available while these migrations were going on globally to assist any of the end users with their upgrade. And then Kyle's team, they globally had somebody. Poor Mike on his team, I think, worked countless hours, spreading across a couple regions to be there for us in the event that we needed some level 3 support. But from my perspective, very successful. We will continue to leverage both companies. We're leveraging them now, as Kyle stated, for PC swaps. It makes it easy when you have to replace someone's PC to just leverage Swimmage, send them a cable, they transfer their data, and they're up and running. And we've gotten, just incredible feedback from our end users on that process. And ReadyWorks is going to assist us going forward with our refresh process. So, the relationship will continue, and we're looking forward to, the success of that as well.
Kyle, did you add anything in terms of specific outcomes that you saw?
I'm really delighted with the outcomes. There were some roadblocks along the way that we hit, but we're able to achieve success around them. We just work around the changes in the environment, and the team was wonderful to work with. It was actually a really good team effort and a good partnership.
Paul, what would you say in terms of specific outcomes for this project?
Oh, I think we were on a forced march to get this project done, which is the thing that brought us together. But the fact that we've kind of now roadmap again what the next years and the coming years look like from a refresh and an asset perspective, I think is indicative of kind of what the outcome is. Right? We had a successful program. It was met all the objectives, and now this is now changing kind of how MXGBT facilitates its life cycle management, its refresh process, and between Swimmage and ReadyWorks, kind of those are the underpinning foundations by which that happens. So I would say that's a pretty positive takeaway.
Indeed. So what about expanding this? Patty, do you see expanding this to other use cases?
Yeah, we actually ironically, we just met on that this morning. We're looking at, like I stated, we're looking at refresh. We've got actually, we're in the process. We've had some past acquisitions. We have some new acquisitions, things coming up. We're looking at how we can potentially leverage Swimmage for domain migrations and some other things. Obviously, when you acquire companies, how easy is it? How great would it be, to just send somebody a USB? They go ahead and, insert that and upgrade to your new platform, get your latest image. That's a great use case. And then, like we stated, with refreshes and just looking at how we can leverage ReadyWorks to make sure reporting, right? We've been dealing with spreadsheets for a long time, and we want to get out of the spreadsheet business. And ReadyWorks, I think, is going to give us the opportunity to do that. And it's going to give us the ability to look at how we, do some version control. But, those are just a few of the use cases, but I think there's probably many more as well.
All right, sounds great. Patty, Paul, Kyle, I really appreciate you sharing your expertise today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.